courage and ignorance is a very potent combination for success. That person nodded and I said, in bracket, failure.
The first thing which people commented was that how can Captain A.K. Singh, Major A.K. Singh go when he's got only one leg? I had to meet the finance minister myself, bypassing the Army headquarters, Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Finance, and that too nobody would allow me in, even in uniform. And I had to catch him going down in a lift to ask him for money.
He said that, don't worry, you'll come, there will be a time when you will enjoy the storms. And I looked at him and I said, this guy's crazy.
The next bad stretch we had was the South African stretch. Even I would say near Mauritius it was very bad. But then the South African stretch was very bad, so much so that we almost going to hit the rocks of South African coast. But nevertheless, God was very kind. We lost touch with India and we couldn't get through. The government got panicky, and whereas Trishna disappeared, they ordered a search for us, requesting the South African government on whom we were not very friendly wickets. And nevertheless, they sent their aircraft and they sent their ship also, but they could not locate Trishna. And with the result, everybody thought we are gone. But it was very nice and very cheerful when we received a call from Saint Helena, where Napoleon was imprisoned and buried, and that we are here and still alive. And that really pushed up the parents and also set everybody thinking, should our father continue on the journey or shall we call him back?
Actually, when we were sailing past Madagascar on towards the South African, to round the Cape of Good Hope, we were hit by tremendous storms and again following seas. And what happens is we have buoys that are kept ready that you can just flick with your hand and throw to a man overboard. Because a man overboard is a man you have lost. There's almost very few people who can claim to be, I have not read of any who lost men overboard and recovered anybody. So you're clipped to the boat by your lifeline, which is a strong lifeline and a harness. So the waves can't just, take you off the boat and you'll never be found again. And these buoys are called Dan buoys or light buoys, depending on several functions. One of them have got telescopic antenna. The moment it hits salt water, it'll start flashing a light and got a small beacon. And AP and Shekhar were on watch, if I may say, AP. You may like to take it on. What happened to those buoys? You remember?
Actually, the buoys are fastened reasonably well to the stern of the boat, as you said, ready to be thrown into the sea anytime if a person falls overboard in a big storm, because there are big waves hitting you every time, and it's very easy if you slip your footing, you can just fall overboard. So the waves coming from behind was so big and so powerful, you can say, that we lost all our Dan buoys, which were tied to the boat by nylon rope.
What happens is the whole wave takes over like that and the buoys self-release themselves.
And the ropes also broke.
Yeah.
So by the time we finished the storms, we had lost our the Dan buoys which were there at the stern of our boat. So that was the...
Not just that, when we lost the first one, I remember we turned back to try to look for it because it had light. We spent about 40-45 minutes, hour and a half trying to look for it. We just couldn't find it. I mean, that's what would happen if a man was overboard and you'd thrown a buoy to him, even if you caught the buoy, you would never find him. Actually, we just didn't find that buoy.
Yes. At the sea, if you see, when storms hit, there's that froth which comes out white, everything is churning, that frothy.
So, yeah, the big froths on the
there's nothing actually visible beyond the immediate vicinity of the boat. You may think that it's a flat sea. It's not a flat sea. Everything just vanishes underwater.
And then when we came across, we finished with that one and we were heading towards the Cape of Good Hope and the storm abated. the Benguela current, the Agulhas currents and the Benguela currents. They're about 3 knots, 3.5 knots, pretty strong currents. So even if you don't have any wind, you're still doing about 3 knots, which is a reasonable speed for a reasonable, for a cruising yacht. And we were rounding Cape of Good Hope and crossing our fingers because it's known, basically it was known as the Cape of Storms. But just during the days of the discoverers who would cross it from Europe, they called it Cape of Good Hope so that the new, hands on the ship would not start trembling in fear when they came to Cape of Good Hope. So they called it Cape of Good Hope. We were rounding it and keeping our fingers crossed, and it was dense fog. That's the next thing that many of us who are listening might like to know, that a danger of fog is in many ways equal to any storm, because in a small boat, you're just not visible to any ship. And that is one of the busiest shipping routes of the world is around the Cape of Good Hope. So we were all silent like anything, keeping our ears cocked for any sound of any ship's engine. And quiet. Just listen to any ship's engine. You wouldn't know what to do because you couldn't make out which direction it's coming from. And those were very tense moments. We came out, the moment we rounded Cape Agulhas, which is the southern tip of Cape South Africa, and we passed and saw Cape of Good Hope. And the moment we passed it, true to its history, before the full force of a storm hit us, just after the fog, and Cape Town radio on our VHF radio. This is Cape Town radio, storm warning, 60, 65 knots, 60 knots gusting to 65. We said, we are already in the middle of the storm. So, we rode it out, and then, of course, Atlantic was a reasonably peaceful passage, yeah.
One point which hasn't come out, which viewers may not know, that was the time when India didn't have diplomatic relations with South Africa because of apartheid. Actually, your passports in those days were stamped valid for all countries except South Africa, because you are not allowed to go to South Africa. So,
we weren't
allowed to halt at Cape Town because of this reason. And we had to bypass the whole of Cape of Good Hope without a halt.
Yeah.
Even in an emergency, we were told you can't stop.
In fact,
there.
that was you did the passage planning, a lot of it. The passage from Mauritius to St. Helena was planned as our longest voyage, which we had roughly planned it to take about 60 days, if I remember correctly. And water rationing was very much on the cards. Finally, we, because of Agulhas and Benguela currents and following winds and seas just after Cape of Good Hope, we finally, I think, crossed it in something like 39 days or something 33 days. And even then, water rationing was, had to be adopted.
Yeah.
So
I remember that we planned the food and all for about 45 days.
Yeah.
And as far as
the water rationing was what? 2 liters per man per day. Whether you drank it, you washed your face, you made tea, you made chawal, jo bhi karna ho, 2 liters per man per day was the water rationing.
So that was throughout, we didn't have the water storage capacity.
Yeah.
And you can imagine 2 liters per man per day for everything, including your bath.
There was no bath.
So there was only bath when the rains came.
Yeah, there was no
fresh
bath.
water and with sea water, of course.
See, the advantage was all of us were smelling the same. So.
And then we, as far as from taking off from St. Helena with the good news that we arrived, we went on to Extension Island, and there, if you remember, the Americans did not allow us to reach.
Yep.
Can you say something about that, DK?
Yes. I'd like to speak about the bath first. One day, Brig Chowdhury, who was then a colonel, he, didn't take, he had enough of this sweaty thing and with his long hair and everything. And he decided, look, I am going to have a bath. It was a peaceful. Atlantic Passage was much more peaceful, entire Atlantic, compared to this business up to the Cape of Good Hope and again the Pacific Ocean. So one day he dunked a bucket of water and sloshed over himself, and much to against everybody's advice, which we had read, hamari bhi theoretically thi, he rubbed a lot of soap in his hair. When he rubbed soap in his hair, it all became gummy and it wouldn't come out. So, then he had a rough time trying to just comb it off, dust it, dry it. It took a couple of days, I think, for the gummy and the dry and everything to come off.
That's right.
Anyway, that's just on the side. But
You're right.
talking,
In fact, putting the soap made actually.
There's something called sea soap. You can only use that.
That's right.
Anyway, talking about Saint Ascension, as you were saying, that Saint Helena was a very memorable stop where Napoleon was interned and died over there in Longwood House. And we met the oldest turtle in the world also there, Mr. Henry or something. What was his name? I don't remember. Something like that. They'd called him. And he was over 101 years old or something like that. And then they had the Jacob's ladder going up to that place. And what I remember about St. Helena is that they had these gun ports. The British, both in Gibraltar and in St. Helena, they had taken guns up to the rocks, the mountains, and inside tunneled to take the guns up and things like that, of ammunition up, because they were basically ship warfare oriented, the British. So they thought of everything like a ship's portholes and things like that. So we went ashore, and there was an old man leaning on the railing, and he saw our boat, and our boat is pretty small, 11 meters, 36 feet, not very big. So he was leaning against the railing, and we were passing by. We also were looking at our boat from there. So he said, "What boat is this?" He didn't know that we were the crew. So it's an Indian boat. He said, "How many crew?" I said, 6. I remember his comment. He said, "What are they doing? Migrating?" So I said, "How do you carry the guns up there to those mountains, you know?" Yeah. So as an engineer, we're all engineers. I was a young man. I didn't have much of an imagination, which I should have had. So he said we created pitons and things like that of solid iron. Rungs dal ke crevices mein, then we block and tackle se we pull the guns up. I said, "Wow, that seems pretty, now plausible and doable once you explain it." Yeah. So he made a comment, and I still remember that. He said, "Those were days of wooden ships and iron men. These are days of iron ships and wooden men." So, old wisdom is a little, So then, as Brig Chowdhury was saying, we tried to seek permission to go to Ascension Islands. The Americans said no way, because it's a high defense security island. The whole island has got no ethnic population of its own. It is a high security island, literally owned only by America and England. And it was a staging point in the Falklands War for the war on Argentina also. And it was then a telecom point for the global communications. They said that we heard that the moon buggy had been first tried on the Ascension Islands, because the landscape was all lunar and volcanic and everything. And as you may remember, volcanic rock this big, porous inside, totally, was light like this, and you could hold it up like this, like Hanuman, because it was all porous inside, pretty light. So we took some pictures holding it like that later. But the Americans didn't allow us. They said, "No, you can't come in." So we said, fine. Then I think somewhere around the last day before leaving or something, they finally said, "All right." They are so defensive and aggressive towards Indians that even what are the island in the Indian Ocean? The American island near Mauritius. San Diego
Garcia.
They said, "No ways." We said, "Supposing our yacht needs repairs, help, and they said, "We'll send out a ship, pick the whole boat up, repair you, but we'll put you back into the sea. You can't enter our defense ports." That was their approach. And last May, they said, "All right, you can come in, but tie alongside our ship outside," which was a fuel ship, because they would maintain a lot of defense stuff and all that reserve stuff on the island. But I think somewhere down the line, they relented and said, "All right," they allowed us to come and take a walk on the island and things like that. But even then, I remember our entry into the island. There were commandos who came in, or some kind of guys. They came into a black inflatable, and they were also in black dress. And in the middle of the night, we were heading towards Ascension, and on a pitch black night, this speedboat approached us and just signaled. And they came close, and all they said was, "Follow me." So we looked at them. I said, "ये पता नहीं कहाँ ले जा रहे हैं, कौन है ये?" काले ड्रेस में 2-3 लोग बैठे थे. So they took us in. We tied alongside the Maersk Ascension, which was the ship, a fuel-carrying ship, as their reserve fuel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and things like that. And the island bristled only with dish antenna. That's it. You could see it was a volcanic island. All you could see was dish antenna, and security stuff.
That's what we learned later on, that the Americans were carrying out moon landing trials there, and they didn't want Indians to come in and infiltrate and gather the knowledge. And
whatever.
I have 6 army officers come to our island and from the blue.
are they doing?
So that was the reasoning. And we then carried on to Brazil, Natal, Belém,
Guyana, Suriname, Guyana,
Guyana,
Trinidad, Tobago,
Port of Spain.
Barbados. We were delaying our voyage then because of passage planning, what was done. We made a pretty fast passage up to Brazil, Natal. And we wanted to enter the Pacific much later because passage planning and all AP's 40 and KS Rao's. You have to study the oceans and see over 30 years what are the months. Like it would be foolish to go out in Indian monsoons to Cherrapunji or somewhere on a car. So the worst days of the storm in a month, in those months, you've got to avoid those oceans. I mean, it's pretty common sense. So we were pretty early on to that place, so we were delaying our going. So we decided to nip into small ports on our way, and that's why we called into several ports there, and then made it to Panama to cross over.
Till we heard, if you remember, we were to go to Miami to repair the boat, until we heard there's a storm in the Gulf of Mexico, and when we diverted and went to Panama. And of course, at Panama, a major repair of the boats was carried out, and we thought we'll be good if we go to the American side of the port, they'll give us free everything. But unfortunately, they gave us a bill of I don't know how many $1,000 for repairs. Then we said, thank you very much. So we put on our dungarees and clothes and started the repair ourselves, because with the barnacles sticking all over and hard as a rock, which had to be really chiseled out, we had no other choice. And we regretted that why didn't we go to the Russian side later on.
The Panamanian side.
Yeah. The Panamanian and I believe the Russian are also repairing the ships.
Well,
And then thereafter, of course, we carried on, and we had a lovely stay at Galapagos Islands, which were really unique. So something which struck you, AK, on the Galapagos?
yeah, the Galapagos Islands, as we all know, are islands with a lot of unique natural life, animal life, plant life. Charles Darwin, when he reached Galapagos Islands and studied the life that was on different islands, and some of the wildlife that couldn't cross over the islands had grown differently in different islands over the centuries. And that's why he propounded this theory of evolution on Galapagos Islands. And the Charles Darwin Institute also exists over there. The wildlife there is absolutely amazing. Less said the better, because we'll just take more time describing it. Now everything is available on the internet, and on, at the push of a button, one can study Galapagos life. It was quite amazing to be there and see it. Absolutely amazing wildlife there. And we were lucky to be able to see
what
it.
was amazing was that we had the cold Peru current coming from the South Antarctica side, and we had the equatorial climate, the hot water there, and we had a mix of cold water plants and animals, including the penguin.
Yes.
We encountered the penguin at
In
Galapagos, which is at the equator, of course, small in size. But it was a wonderful halt there. We did extend our stay. And then, of course, went across the Pacific and reached Nuku-Hiva Island, where, of course, a lot of stories are there to be told.
French Polynesia.
And in French Polynesian island, and where again they thought 6 army officers, why have they come here? And a boat was literally ransacked by the customs to find out how much arms have we got with us, so we don't take over any of the we don't take over any of the islands there.
Yeah, Guyana, we had this thing. They came
one very interesting thing which I still remember was that we were invited for lunch by the head of the Nuku-Hiva Islands and the Polynesian Islands who were there. Mayoress, the lady mayor. Red, buxom, tough-looking lady. And,
his memory is good.
and a lot of other ladies around her. And we were welcomed by a garland by the ladies. We were put flowers on the head itself. And the crew was really flattered by the grace of the islands. So we enjoyed it. And,
Yeah, but she also, there was a stone carved like this, in which just about 100 or 150 years ago, they were cannibals. So they had a stone carved like this. When the one tribe defeated the other tribe, वो उसके chief को लेके उसकी गला उसमें रख के ना, then they had an axe sort of thing made of stone, carved out of stone, and the handle had a wooden handle because their gods, the Tiki is their main god in that part of the world, South America and up to there. So the Tiki god was carved on the handle, and with that, you cut the chief's head from here and you eat him up.
And we have a photograph of Bharti putting his head there and the lady putting the axe.
A pose with that.
A pose, of course, with him. But what really struck us was that as we were leaving and thanking everybody, this lady mayor sent her an ADC or somebody with a fat bill of so many local currency. And the bill, I thought we were invitees.
That's why she was a mayoress.
And gave us a fantastic bill, which we didn't have the money also.
Thank God we didn't have it.
Then we had to ask everybody to empty his pockets. And but this was what a custom it was. You invite a chap for kana and a meal, and then you ask to please pay for it. So this was, I mean, really fantastic. And going through all the kacha roads, which we thought anytime we just might go.
Yeah, but all the fruits, they just fall into the road. You collect them for your boat.
Yeah, we collected a lot of
tropical fruit.
Of that.
Yeah. But after that, there's a second longest voyage from Nuku Hiva to Cook Islands, I think. But the second, that was short of that.
We went to Tahiti.
That was the second longest voyage, and it was a pretty fast voyage. But if I can say for myself, my artificial limb first broke because by that time that limb, a very rudimentary limb made in India, and the joint was a mild steel joint. Now, everybody knows, and I also learned the hard way, that mild steel doesn't take salt water very well. It just rusts. So it just broke. And at Tahiti, the French Navy, I was on my crutches, which I carried as emergency. And the French Navy, I just put my limb on my neck like this, and I walked to their workshop and they welded it. But I'm happy to say that their welding is as bad as the Indian Navy's. We are engineers, you normally make a notch for welding and fill it up with a weld. वो जब अगली बार टूटा at Cook Islands, when it broke, you could see अंदर से भी rust है. They hadn't put a proper notch there at all. So that was the first time it broke. I remember Tahiti for that also. That was also there, yeah.
So that was wonderful, of course, being there. And then Tahiti, we had the luxury of the French Navy also looking after us. We stayed in the French Naval Officers Mess. And what they were in Nuku Hiva and in Tahiti, what surprised the people was that telling me that we are very sorry that you had a very bad injury on the head, that you're wearing a big bandage. So I said, I'm sorry, it's not a bandage, it's a turban. So they said, oh my God, we've never seen this thing. But
so the kids came along and they said, what is this? He said, it's a turban. He said, no, but why are you wearing it? He said, that's our custom. So they said, how much of cloth? He said, 5 meters. They said, no, show it to us. So then Colonel Chowdhury, now Brigadier, he'd take off the turban, measure out the 5 meters and tie it back on his head. So all these kids started calling him Ali Baba.
They said, you must be taking a couple of hours over it. I said, no, 5 minutes. So they said, no, show it to us. So I had to give a demonstration to all the people in the mess. And so next day when you're walking around, the local took photographs and it appeared. And our youngest crew member, Captain Naveen Ahuja,
was given an offer for marriage.
So was saying that why is this old man with white beard getting all the attention and I'm the youngest who should be the hot favorite of all the Tahitian.
Sharma family ne usko bol diya, you leave the boat and we'll marry you to our daughter.
So I had to tie my second turban on Naveen Ahuja and I said, now go, I'll stay here, you let yourself loose. And he was very happy that he was encountered with a lot of girls touching his cheeks and all that. So that was a good experience. And thereafter we moved on and of course after Rarotonga we touched New Zealand and New Zealand we had
Cook Islands.
Cook Islands.
Fiji.
Yeah, Fiji first, you're right. Fiji first.
And another horrendous storm from Fiji to New Zealand when we blew out both the mainsails.
Yeah.
In the night. And then two of us, K.S. Rao and Shekhar, in the dead of the night, with two mainsails blown out. If you don't, I'd like to say here, if you don't maintain steerage in the boat, your rudder is useless. It's like trying to turn the steering wheel of a car and the car is not moving. So your steering wheel gets you nowhere because it only works when the car is moving. So our rudder would only work when the boat has got, steerage, got some kind of movement, and the sails were blown out. And so in the pitch dark of the night, the strings had all ruptured, the sewing. So to take a needle in the night with a thread in a rocking boat where you're seasick like anything and try to stitch the sail hole for hole in the middle of the night, boy, I really admire both K.S. Rao and Shekhar. They did it, and we had a sail up next morning, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, fingers bleeding, turn by turn, everybody had a hand.
Because the boat is rocking and you're trying to put the needle through the same hole.
That was
because the sail cloth is very tough. You can't make new holes.
Very bad experience. Of course, our worst journey in the whole cruise was between Auckland and and Australia.
Sydney.
And so Auckland and Sydney. And there we had the worst cyclone, I would say, the entire cruise. And we got caught in the eye of a cyclone, which was again a fantastic experience, where we said our last prayers to God, at least I said about 10, 15 times. And God said, no vacancy here, carry on. And so we had to carry on. And I'm sure the rest of the crew was also quite injured. We used to be, anybody inside used to be hit, swung from one end to the other, bang your head against it, bang your body against it. You couldn't sleep, you couldn't cook, and it was a bad experience. And AK again suffered a lot of damage there. And that was...
after that, along the eastern coast of Australia, we may try to recount a little quickly now because the journey is pretty long. We coasted the eastern coast of Australia through Great Barrier Reef. It was a very interesting journey and things like that, very interesting people. And I think in all our jokes that we've been talking about at ports, I think all of us carried a feeling that we were actually mini ambassadors of the country, and we carried our flag to the local people when communication was not very good amongst anybody at all. So we were conscious of that fact, and we projected, wherever we could, what we could about India and our culture. And when we finished at the northern tip of Eastern Australia and crossed over the Bay of
Darwin Straits.
We went to Darwin through the Gulf of Carpentaria. That itself, in the olden days, was when they couldn't see the other end, they thought it was an ocean. At around that time, I remember two things. I got a letter from the Guinness Book recorder for blue water sailing, that's the ocean sailing. His name was Nobby Clark, D.H. Clark. Squadron leader D.H. Clark had flown in the Second World War with a double amputee ace British pilot called Douglas Bader, whose book you may have heard about, called Reach for the Sky. He had shot down something like 24 German aircraft and had to paradrop and become a German prisoner of war because his aircraft was shot down and his artificial limb was stuck into his aircraft. He says, I'm lucky to be alive because of my limb, because I could just unstrap it and jump down. If it wasn't artificial, he would have been stuck inside his aircraft. So D.H. Clark had flown with Douglas Bader, and I got a communication from him over there, all handwritten letters those days. And he said that you're probably the first physically handicapped man in the world to sail around the world. So the Guinness Book does not record handicapped records because they say people are crazy enough को जो right hand का record होता है वो left hand काट के अपने आप को record में. There are crazy people like that in this world. So they say we don't record handicapped or we only record quantified records हम करते नहीं है. They communicated it to me. So he wrote saying that you're the first physically handicapped man to sail around. Well, it felt good. But although you don't go around the oceans trying to set records, the oceans don't recognize records. They're too large. Your nature is too large for these petty things like this. The second letter I remember came from Admiral R.L. Pereira, Ronnie Pereira, who was then the Chief of Naval Staff. I've got these letters lying with me, and I would be wanting to gift them somewhere or the other before I move to Valhalla. And hey, look at the humility of the man, the Chief of the Naval Staff. He writes, by now you've crossed the largest body of ocean on earth, the Pacific, the mighty Pacific. You must have wrung out more sea water from your underwear than most seamen have seen in their lives. Just like Ronnie.
That was very nice.
Just like Ronnie.
Lovable man.
Let us lie with me.
Very nice.
So then we crossed over to Darwin and then the Oriental waters and
Well,
Singapore.
At Darwin, we got a message from Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi that after seeing a lot of this bad weather and cyclones and all, that he wants to meet the crew. And we fixed up that we were halted Darwin, the thing. But unfortunately, the Indian government and the Australian government said that we are not responsible
For his security.
for his security. If he has to meet you, then if something happens to the Prime Minister, we are not responsible.
It's your lookout.
So we are recommending that he will not meet you. He lands at Darwin, we are already at Darwin, but the two cannot meet because of the security problem. So obviously then he flew to Sydney and carried on with his visit, and we carried on further and went on to Indonesia and thereafter to...
I would like to say here one more thing, that the storms, of course, Tasman Sea, and then usse pehle this Fiji leg where we blew out all the sails.
Yeah.
Then up along the eastern coast of Australia, the weather was not our main problem. Our main problem was shipping, because in the
Shipping lane.
that channel, the along East Australia, we came sometimes there were very scary moments with shipping. That is one. I'd like to say here, very scary moments. We could run down at any time. We managed to survive. And then I'd like to say, back into Oriental waters, there were very nice, quaint islands in Indonesia that we visited, very ethnic, very nice ones, and we felt we are back into Oriental waters. Singapore was good, and then of course to port to South Andaman Islands, the port of
Nicobar.
Car Nicobar, and we were virtually home by then.
So we touched homeland after 14 months, and it was a lovely welcome there. And from there went on to Colombo, and from Colombo to Cochin, and then back to Bombay. And where Mr. Rajiv Gandhi said, I couldn't meet you at Darwin, I'll meet you at Bombay. But there was this Hong Kong problem going on, and he went on to the Andaman Islands to gift an island to all the Indians who were stuck up and being shunted out of Hong Kong. And so that negotiation was going on, and he couldn't extract himself. But nevertheless, we had our Chief of Army Staff, we had the various Defense Ministry people, the Governor of Maharashtra, and to welcome us.
If you forget, because the government said 26 January parade aa rahi hai, we want Trishna as one of the floats for the Republic Day parade. So Brigadier Chowdhury, AP, these are the guys who really engineered it and put the boat onto a railway rack. Amazing job. And it was moved to Delhi. And वहाँ एक engineers ने overnight make a float for Trishna. So float बना के उस पे world map ये वो big globe was also set up with the route and everything. And they put Trishna out there, and Trishna went down the Rajpath on the 26th January as a float with all of us. We were there and waving to the public and everything. It was a grand moment for us. After that, somebody called up I was staying with my sister in Delhi. And somebody called up and said, वो आपका ना वो मॉडल बहुत अच्छा था. हमने कहा वो मॉडल नहीं थी, वो हमारी एक्चुअल बोट थी.
You'll be surprised that the announcer made a statement, hey, we have now a model of Trishna going. And the army chap who was the commentator had to tell them that this is not
the model, this is the actual
boat. And people won't believe it. They said, how can this boat go around the world?
Yeah.
And I may say that bringing the boat, 10th January we landed up, and bringing the boat from Bombay to Delhi was a Herculean task. I think more difficult than sailing around the world. And one had to take permission of the railway minister, very kind of him. I had to fly to Delhi to take his permission, but nobody would give permission. Aircraft, Air Force said we can't take it.
We can't take it.
Nothing else would go, but Prime Minister said, no, we want the boat. So we took off, I think on 13th January or so, or 14th, and reached there on 23rd January in time for the Republic Day dress rehearsal. Because they said if you don't reach, then you can't take part. So it was a maddening task to get the boat there, but we
Nice.
all did it.
Yeah.
Dicey
And
one.
so
Maybe
that
you're
was
supposed to say something about
a good experience.
the after the Republic Day.
So after, yes,
Yeah,
after
the-
Republic Day,
One of the highlights of this float is, which has been missed out. Normally, all the floats come at the end of the parade, sequence wise, state wise. This is the only time, probably in Republic Day, the float was part of the army contingent, not as part of the.
Spearheading in
Yeah,
front.
it was with the army contingents, not
Yeah, so
with
with
the
that
floats
we-
of the
how
state.
we
So that
ended
is
our
a
voyage.
that is a sort of an honor given to
Honor
this,
to the
that
army.
it was kept separate
So-
well,
from the
ladies
rest.
and gentlemen,
With that we ended
this
our voyage
was,
and,
in brief, I would say, our journey around the world, which took 470 days to sail 30,000 nautical miles
50,000
or 54,000 kilometers.
around the world.
And this was something which no Indian has done, and this is, we could do it. And to tell you the good news, all 10 of us are alive today. And we
we're
are
going to be for quite a while.
in excellent shape, and we will carry on. Might see the 100 years also.
Very good.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, AK.
Thanks, AP.
Thank you.
Thank you,
AP.
sir.
And sir, we forgot that in America and in India, what did you think of this journey? Pammi, sir.
You see, when our Iranian adventure cruise was declared a success, I was designated as the skipper of the around the world.
Great.
Yeah.
And I gave it a very serious thought. One reason was I was 10 years older than these guys. Then I had been superseded. Then my two sons were going to college, and I thought I wouldn't have the money to push them through. So I declined. I said, sorry, sir, I don't seem to be the right person. But I was following every step of your journey bit by bit and feeling so proud
Great.
that my boys are doing it.
Great.
See, that they are doing it, they trained with me, they've got sterling qualities, they'll never fail anybody. So that was a very proud moment for me when you actually completed. I knew they'll complete, they'll do everything fine. Nature was kind and we were lucky and the crew were great. So,
Nature
people
was
like
not
you
very
have-
kind, sir.
Yeah.
But we
No doubt.
we learned our how to handle storms. We learned we were
was.
by the end of it we were
Very-
pretty good at boat handling and storms.
Very,
Boy.
very beautiful job done.
Well, thank you, AK, AP, and Pammi, sir. And thank you, folks, for listening to this long
Thank you, sir.
adventure. We could probably carry on for
No,
another
no.
2 days.
No.
But I think we will close shop now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good night, everybody.
Friends, our Faujis have been and continue to be the lifeline of our nation. Come hell or high water, they have always been there for us, whether in times of war or natural calamity or any other challenge India has ever faced. And the culture, traditions, and history of the Indian military are part of a rich heritage, painstakingly preserved by one and all. To cherish and celebrate this heritage, a unique initiative called Fauji Days has been launched by the budding startup 99 Beagles. So what is Fauji Days? Well, it is primarily an oral history project based on interviews and recordings. Faujis always have tons of stories to relate, many of them inspiring, thought-provoking, funny or engaging, and highly satisfying for the curious, especially young adults in their formative years. These engaging interactions between officers, men and women from our services, with young adults from schools and universities are being captured on camera by us. We want to showcase the diversity of lived experiences on the one hand and the perceptions and expectations on the other. Allow me to also add that the scope of Fauji Days initiative is not limited to just oral history. It also encompasses the written word and the world of military publishing. Already, several books by eminent military authors have been published under this umbrella, and all have been well received by the readers. The Fauji Days website is another crucial resource designed to house the diverse aspects of this project. It features multiple blogs, reference and archival material, and a community newsletter that highlights the progress made as well as the new recordings and books. Feel free to log on and subscribe. I warmly welcome you to be a part of this initiative, no matter what color uniform a Fauji wore, or whether he or she served on terra firma, flew in the air, or rode the waves. The fact remains that each one of these brave hearts is a reservoir of remarkable tales and cherished memories. Fauji Days wants to share these memories and tell these tales to a much wider audience. If a nation is made of memories, then Fauji Days will prove that Fauji men and women have contributed some of the best. As a Fauji, you can reach out to us and tell us about your rich experiences. Get in touch and we will revert with an audiovisual team equipped to capture your recall. Or if you're too distant, we can guide you about how to record and send it to us. Of course, you can also write your tale and send it to us to be featured here. We have the wherewithal to capture you on video from whatever location on the planet. All we want is to know your story so that India knows her story better. It is incomplete without yours. Please also feel free to send your contributions to this archive of India's valor in the form of nostalgic pieces, anecdotes, pictures, or other content you may wish to share with the wider Fauji Day community. On behalf of Team 99 Beagles, I thank you. As they say, Fauji Days never end. In fact, they are just beginning. So, Fauji Days forever. Jai Hind.